Hey everybody, Dom here. Do you recognize this place in the game Team Fortress 2? Does this location seem familiar? How about this place? Does this location bear a resemblance to any location that you may know of? Now you might be thinking, Dom, this is just Capture the Flag Turbine, why are you acting like I wouldn't recognize one of the most popular maps in the game? Dear viewer, are you sure this is Capture the Flag Turbine? The truth is, it actually isn't. What you're seeing is actually the final result of an elaborate Team Fortress 2 map-making project I've been working on. Today, I'd like to present to you all this project. This is Capture the Flag Turbine recreated from memory. I have two inspirations for this project. The first is my Cursed Turbine map-making project. I abandoned that project, but luckily it was finished by someone else. Consider watching the video series on the project for more insight. A link to the playlist is in the description. To summarize it, I was trying to edit Capture the Flag Turbine to be slightly off, so that it was unsettling for people familiar with the original map. Once the final version was made by someone else and I saw the final map in action, I realized all my ideas to change the map weren't actually very subtle. This gave me the idea to come up with a completely different approach to making a cursed version of Turbine. The new idea was to remake the map from nothingness, only using my memory and logical deduction. Human memory isn't perfect, so the end product would inevitably be slightly off. And that was perfect for my goal. My second inspiration was the ROM hack for Super Mario World called SMW Remade from Memory. This ROM hack does as the title suggests, remakes the entire game of Super Mario World only using the memory of the creators as a guide. The ROM hack was made as a fun little challenge. The authors called the results thoroughly unsettling and a testament to the fallibility of human memory. Playing through the ROM hack firsthand, this is an accurate description. This is the perfect framework for what I want to create, and therefore, I adopted the idea. Since memory is the big component of this project, I'd like to quickly explain what my familiarity with Turbine was before I started working on this project. I never really played the map very much. I don't really enjoy Capture the Flag maps in Team Fortress 2 because the rounds could run on very long. Also, I like team play and playing towards the objective, and the average Capture the Flag player doesn't know that there is an objective. Regardless, I'd say I know the layout of the map by memory. It's not a very complex map. My last exposure to the map was 2 years ago when I stopped working on the original Cursed Turbine project. I haven't played Turbine since then. I saw the map decompiled back then, but I don't remember very many specific details as to how the map was made. With the backstory out of the way, let me explain how I made this map. There are three main components that determine how it was created. The first component is my skill level. I am decent at making maps. Once you know what you're doing, making maps in the source engine is easy, just very time consuming. The second component is my memory. The better my memory is of the original Turbine, the higher the likelihood the details will be faithful to the original. The third component is logical deduction. This is underrated, but making assumptions based on external factors is really good for guessing how the original map was made. Basically, I assume the original creator of Turbine was of average skill level for the time the map was made, and did things the easiest way possible. I'll elaborate on this in greater detail in a moment. I started this project with the central room. The thing about the source engine and mapping in it is, by default, textures want to align with the grid of the XYZ axis. If I create a wall that's 256 units high, and the bottom is directly on the line that represents the 0 in height, the texture will fit perfectly vertically. Look at this. If I move the texture off of the 0 height line, the texture will remain aligned to it. Because of the way this works, it's easier to have walls start at the height of 0, and then have upper floors start at the height of 256, and then the next floor start at the height of 512, etc, etc. A lot of textures even have three versions of themselves. One that has a trim near the bottom, meant for the bottom part of a wall, one that has no trim, meant for the middle 256 units, and one that has a trim near the top, meant for the top of the wall. Note, the surface of a wall can only have one texture in the source engine. Ignoring decals, blending displacement, and overlays. Forget about all those, just forget I mentioned it. Anyways, back to Turbine. Since I assume the original creator was not making life harder for themselves, having to realign textures over and over, I can assume they started at the 0 height line, and made the main room 3 wall textures high. With that assumption, I made the main room 3 stories high. Since I assume the bottom floor is at 0, I assume the upper floor is at 256. So I placed the catwalk up there, and later, the floor for the spawn rooms at the same height. One of the first things I did was put down the turbines. Their placement is based on looking nice on the top-down grid, as well as next to other things in the room. The spacing of them, with relation to the shipping containers and the stairs, all comes down to looking right. Next I made the little alcoves on the side of the stairs. I know from experience, these stairs are not props. They're made from brushes. Basically, they're made out of the same stuff as walls and floors. This means there's more control as to their shape, but they can only be pretty simple looking. They still don't look 100% right to me, but this is the guess I went for. In general, a stair in Team Fortress 2 is 16 units high. Technically, the classes will automatically scale, they'll automatically walk up anything that's 18 point whatever units high maximum, but most people use 16 units because it looks nicer in the editor and it aligns to the grid better. Next I made the windows for this room. They look something like this as far as I recall. I remember this room has 3 pillars connecting to 3 ceiling beams, so the windows are centered around the lines of the pillars. I remember the outdoors has no 3D skybox. One side, I have no idea which, has a billboard, and the other side has these spinning vents. I have no idea if this is the correct number of vents, if they're spaced correctly, or if they're at the right height. Speaking of things I'm unsure about, I also don't know which side is supposed to have which team's shipping container. Next I placed the lights in this room. I remember thinking it was really stupid and ugly that the lights hung off the support beams rather than the space between the support beams. That's how I remember where they're supposed to go, because I would have done it differently. Another design aspect of this map I don't agree with, and is memorable because I don't agree with it, is the use of the shuttered door texture on the ceilings. That's how I know this texture belongs here. Speaking of textures, the original Turbine is one of the oldest maps in the game. Due to the way that time works, the map can only contain assets that existed at the time of its release. Ignoring the competitive win-loss room, that was added later on, I'm not including it in this remake. The knowledge that the original map can't possibly contain textures, props, and sound effects added after its release is actually pretty useful. Team Fortress 2 contains a lot of assets. Being able to ignore many of them simply because they're newer than the map is really helpful. For clarity, I didn't individually look at the metadata of every texture. I can just recognize, this floor is from King of the Hill King, and this terminal is from Robot Destruction Asteroid. Anyways, back to the process of making this map. Next I made these enclosed areas just outside the walk-in vents. I recall them being color schemed in some way, so I colored the trims of the windows. I know the top of them is off limits, so I added invisible walls. To finish off the main room, I added the finer details. The fake doors on the catwalk, the team logos, the barrels and the machine under the stairs, etc, etc. It makes sense for the barrels on the red side to be red, and for the barrels on the blue side to be blue. I don't know for sure if they're supposed to be like that, but it's just logical. I remember there being these emergency style lights above the shuttered doors, so I added them. I think there's some sort of trim around the room, so I made one with a texture that seemed reasonable. I remember there being an orange sign at the bottom of the stairs. This text on this sign doesn't really fit this area, but it's the most fitting orange sign that I could find. Something to note, the downward pointing arrows above the openings to the large hallways is the only detail that does not come from memory. What happened was, while working on this project, I was browsing the TF2 subreddit one day and I came across a gameplay video taking place in the center room of Turbine. I closed the video as quickly as I could, but it was too late. I already saw the detail. After that incident, I decided to stay off Team Fortress 2 related social media until the project was finished. It's unfortunate that I saw a detail, but that's life. People make mistakes and learn from them, and I'm no different. I apologize that this project isn't 100% from memory. It's only 99.99%. Anyways, next I made the vents. These were suspiciously easy to make. Sus. I built them based on how the vent texture aligns by default. This is going to be difficult to explain if you aren't looking at the video right now. When I say down, left, right, up, it's from a top-down view. What I did was start with the floor. I put down the floor and resized it left, stopping exactly when the vent's repeating texture stops. I then took another floor and resized it downwards until the texture aligned again. I did the same again left, up, and left again until the basic layout was achieved. Finally, I also did the last part of the vent but left it open-ended as I don't know how far down it should go. After the floor was made, I put the walls and I put the ceiling on top. Next I made the stairs leading to the hallway in front of the spawns. The stairs were easy. They're all 16 units high and 24 units deep. I know there's a small landing at the bottom of the stairs before the shutter door, and I know there's a small space on the sides with a trim. Speaking of the door, I assume the door uses the garage door frame prop for the sides and the top. Assuming this makes me know the dimensions of the opening. If this prop is actually used for this door, that means the door must be exactly this size. The ceiling over the stairs was annoying. The Hammer Editor, the program used to make maps, does not like things that slope in 3 dimensions. What I mean is, a normal slope is fine, but a slope that also slopes in a different axis at the same time freaks out the editor a bit. Yes, this actually pushes the limitations of the editor. You slope a slope and you're acting like Icarus and flying too close to the sun. It's super important to make sure the points in space that represent the edges of the wall slope are all perfectly aligned with the grid and are whole numbers. This is how we avoid getting burnt, if we're staying with that Icarus metaphor. Anyways, I made the slope ceilings. After a lot of trial and error, consisting of resizing textures, I eventually got the wall textures on the side of the staircase to follow the incline and align with the upper floor and lower floor wall texture. Next, I made the hallways with the spawn rooms. I remember there's a side area at the top of the stairs with a fake shutter door and an ammo pack. I remember the walls curved, so I made a wall curve. This is one of those techniques every single source map maker knows of and has done before, but it's interesting, so I'll share it with you all. To make a rectangular prism into a curved corner, all you do is select the tool that cuts walls. Make the grid big. Now, you cut from the topmost right point to the second rightmost bottom point. Do it again over and over, moving down 1 point and moving left 1 point each time. Eventually, you end up with a curved wall. Amazing! I made the hallway. I remember the ceiling being the shutter door texture once again because it's a stupid decision. Not the way I would have done it, and therefore very memorable. I remember the hallway having some support beams on the side, so I added some. I remember the ceiling having a trim, so I used a dark texture and made one. I then made the spawn. It's L-shaped. I went with dimensions that I think look reasonable on the grid. I remember the spawn has doors that look like the doors in the intel room on 2 Fort. So what I did was open up 2 Fort and copy the doors to use as the base for the doors on this remake. Note, there's nothing in the rules of this challenge that excludes me from taking assets from other maps. I'm just using logical deduction. The original Turbine is very old. The creator likely based the design of the spawn room doors off of the doors that look similar on existing Valve-made maps. There's a lot that goes into converting aesthetic doors into functioning doors. The doors I made are absolutely different from the original map's doors, both aesthetically and due to the way that I programmed them. These are elaborate doors. When I make elaborate doors, what I like to do is make the actual door a thin, long, small, invisible brush. I then tell every part of the door, so the bits of glass, the frame, and the door handle prop, to follow the invisible door's movement. It's just easier to do it this way in my opinion. I then set up the logic and the invisible triggers to open the doors. Next I created the spawn points. You'd think it would be hard to place them since they're invisible, but remember, at the start of every round you get a rough idea of where they are when you see everyone standing still. Next I placed down the resupply cabinets. This one and this one I'm sure of. I'm not entirely sure of this one near the back corner of the spawn room. I guess it's because this one is less often used than the other two. Next, I added details to the hallway and to the spawn. When searching for props that were likely used on this map, a very great keyword to use is Spytech. Spytech is sort of the word Valve uses to describe the underground spy-based aesthetic. Early Valve labeled props that fit into this category as Spytech. Anyways, I sprinkled around some vents, added the fire alarm bell, and the signs that point to the battlements and the intel room. I'm fairly certain there are signs to guide players on this map. Inside the spawn, I put down this target image on the wall. I put down a scale and a water cooler. I put this bench and this arrow on the wall. I added these cubbies to the back of the room. It seems weird to use the exact same prop twice right next to each other, but as strange as it sounds, I think that's how the original map did it. I'm not very certain what exists in the ceiling. I went for a long hanging vent. I went with fluorescent lights for the spawn, and large circular lights for the hallway. Next I made the hallways that lead to the intel room. I started with the floor plan. I kept resizing the floor until it looked good enough from a top-down perspective. I did this with the help of a few assumptions. I assume the width of the hallways are consistent. I assume the small out-of-bounds room is just as long and just as wide as the hallway to the right of it. I assume the length of the raised-up platform is just as long as the space near the doorway on the left of the out-of-bounds room. With these assumptions, I can guess the ratios that look correct for the rest of the area. Next, I decorated this area. I think this is the correct placement for the pillars. I gave the raised platform a floor trim on the accessible sides. I did this because it looks better for the handrails to go into metal and not just regular concrete floor. I recall a pipe on the ceiling. I guess it goes here. There's also this large sign on the wall. This feels correct to me. I'm certain there's a fire extinguisher in the middle of this hallway, so I placed one. I feel like there's a fake door that leads into the out of bounds room, so I put one here. In terms of decorating the out of bounds room, I think I made a pretty accurate recreation. I specifically remember the props in the back of the room. Once again, I remember a detail because it's weird. You see, these metal rectangular props are supposed to be used with computer faceplate props. You put this prop on one and it becomes a server. You put this prop on one and it becomes a terminal, etc, etc. What the creator of Turbine did was say, screw that, let's just have empty boxes. I remember all these small machine props in the middle of the room because it always felt like there were too many to me. Next I made the 2 door openings that lead to the intel room. The props used for this kind of doorway are annoying to use. The walls adjacent to the props have to be carved around the prop. Originally, there was no space over the door to place the intel room signs, so I raised the ceilings of this entire area. I think this was for the better, as it made the raised platform make more sense. Oh yeah, the height of the raised platform is simply based on the color of the trim of the wall texture. It's set to be as high as the line where the texture transitions to beige. Next I made the intel room. The first step was to align the layout with the vents, and figure out a good place to make the opening drop down. Luckily, everything aligned well. The next step was to make the staircase that connects the spawn room hallway to the intel room. I made a copy of the staircase that's already made. The one that connects the upstairs hallway to the central room, and I placed it in the correct space. It's not obvious exactly what the correct space is, but luckily I have the power of educated guessing. Next, I made the main area of the intel room. I placed the lower floor 32 units down because that way players can jump out of the pit, and it isn't very deep. The floor uses the hazard black and yellow texture around the edge, and around where the control point goes. The rest is metal. I made the metal grate floor around the perimeter, and made the stairs used to enter the area. I think this corner of the room has an ammo pack, and this corner has a health pack and a fire extinguisher. I put a cart and a corkboard in this corner of the room. This is a bit of a spoiler for the part of the video where I compare my turbine to the original, but out of everything in this map, I'm most astonished at how correct I got this detail. The original map has these 2 props in this corner, and it looks almost exactly like this. Moving on. I next made the out of bounds room behind the intel. I remember there's a slanted glass window leading into it, so I made one. I specifically remember there's an invisible wall blocking players from getting too close to the window, so I placed one. The room itself is simple and uses light textures. I remember the table looking like the one behind the glass in the intel room on 2 Fort, so once again I copied and pasted the asset into this map. I increased the length of the table a bit and placed some chairs around it. I remember a door on the left side of the room, and the main chair being on the right side of the table. The final thing I did in the intel room was make the skylight. I remember there's supposed to be 3 of these retro metal beams across the middle of the skylight. Team Fortress 2 has a lot of these props, so it was difficult to narrow down which one seems the most correct. I vaguely recall there being some sort of slope in the skylight, so I put a slope on both sides. The skylight itself also slopes. I decided to make the high point the side closer to the vent. The idea is, this prevents people from looking at the sky and seeing that there's no walls around the outside of the vents. It helps with the illusion that there could be parts of the building that you just can't see. It's more logical to have the high point on the vent side. Now, the majority of the map is complete. What remains is adding the finer details, as well as the game logic entities so that the map can actually function as a capture the flag map. So, next I added all the small details such as lights and the glowing effect lights have, which is actually a separate thing. Fun fact. I remember from working on Cursed Turbine, the original Turbine actually cheats super hard with lighting. What the original creator did was place down spotlights and then augment the lights by placing down omnidirectional lights. Essentially, rather than depending on spotlights naturally reflecting light off of surfaces to light up an area, they placed down lights to force entire hallways to be bright. Another thing I remember from Cursed Turbine is that all the lights are inexplicably pure white. This is absolutely not something I would recommend doing. Only using pure white makes maps have more of a flat look. Adding a little bit of warmth or coolness to a light goes a long way in changing the mood of an area. Anyways, after installing all the lights, I added a lot of small details, such as the decals that appear under health and ammo pickups. After that, I added clipping to the entire map. Things like invisible walls so that players can ascend and descend staircases more smoothly, and invisible walls near pillars so that players don't get snagged when they walk by. Next, I added Cubemaps to the map. To explain Cubemaps as quickly as possible, they're points in space used to give reflective surfaces a reflection. They're placed near glass, but also in areas without reflective surfaces because the metallic weapons players have also use them for reflections. Next, I selected every single prop on the map individually and adjusted their render distances. The point of doing this is to make the map run better. If a prop is small and far away, or can't be seen because it's just around the corner, setting its render distance so that it's not rendered can save computing resources, and thus make the map run better. Next, I added area portals and hint brushes to the map. What these do is force places out of sight to not render. Turbine isn't a very demanding map to render, but optimizations are optimizations. Why not implement them if you're capable of doing so? Next, I did what you'd think I should have done earlier, but actually is the most convenient to do at this point in time. What I did was copy all of red side of the map, rotate it, and paste it to create the blue side of the map. This sounds simple, but is actually a huge pain in the butt. The reason is, it's very time consuming to go through the entire thing and change all of red team's textures to blue team's textures. All the props that use red team textures also need to be changed to blue team textures. Game logic also needs to be changed for blue side. Stuff like the spawn points, the resupply cabinets, and the spawn doors need a little reprogramming. The map is almost finished at this point. The next step is to add all the game logic and other important entities. Here they are. This one is the spectator camera. These two are for color correction, and these are for high dynamic range. This one is to make the map function as a capture the flag map. This is for water levels of detail. It's pointless on this map as there's no water, it's just here for completion's sake. This one controls the way sunlight is cast from the sky, and the one next to it controls the visual effect for the sun in the sky. This one is for fog. This one controls the small dynamic shadows that appear under dynamic entities, such as the players in 3D space. These two are for spawn doors so that they only open when the correct team is standing next to them. This one controls the ambient sounds present on the map. Normally there are supposed to be many of these with different values placed at different locations. However, since Turbine is such an early map in Team Fortress 2's lifespan, I'm just going to assume the creator of Turbine did what everyone else did at the time and just placed one of these and forgot about it. Now that all these entities are here, it's time to program them to fit for Turbine. This is an iterative process. I started by simply copying the values from 2Fort and then compiling the map to see the results in-game, and then refining the values over and over. It sounds easy, but this is a very time-consuming process. Compiling is what it's called to convert the map from an editor file into a file the game can run. It takes a few minutes each time as the editor calculates lighting and cutting the map into smaller pieces. That sounds weird, just trust me on it. Or don't. Go into the comments and see that every single mapmaker attests that yes, that is indeed what it does. It chops the map into pieces. One of the programming achievements that made the original Doom run well transferred over 14 years into the future to make Team Fortress 2 also run well, cutting everything into chunks so that out-of-sight chunks could be ignored and not rendered. Who would have thought? Next, I added a few of the final details. I placed the flags and the invisible capture zone triggers around them. I changed the skybox texture to the file named SkyTF204. Being an early map, Turbine could have only used the skybox textures available at the time. This one seemed to fit. Next, I added sound effects for the 3 turbines in the middle of the map. Picking a turbine sound effect was difficult, as there are a surprisingly large number of turbine sounds, as well as continuous machine humming sounds, which could also work. I went with this sound. The very last thing I did before performing the final compile was add these 2 pillars to this corner. It just looked kind of empty without them. Plus the ceiling detail felt like it needed the support. After the final compile, I built Cubemaps. Building Cubemaps is a simple process. First you disable reflective surfaces. Then you use one simple console command twice. Once with high dynamic range enabled, and once with high dynamic range disabled. Like magic, suddenly reflective surfaces work. Amazing! After that, I made the image that appears in the loading screen, and the screen you see right after loading into a map. The image with the 2 photographs of the map. Turbine is an old map, so it probably uses 2 photographs stacked vertically. One of the photos is probably of the central room. My memory tells me the other is of someplace red. The flag feels like the most fitting place to take a photo of, so I used a screenshot of the flag for the second image. And now the map. Capture the Flag Turbine, remade from memory, is complete. Since I'm done and I'm no longer making any more changes, It's time to launch the original Turbine and see how accurate my recreation was. Alright, first thing you see when you load up Turbine, the image with the 2 photographs. I correctly remembered what was depicted, but the order is incorrect and the angles the screenshots are taken from are different. So far so good. For the central room, it looks like I made everything a bit brighter. Actually, I made every area a bit brighter than the original. Huh. I put the spectator camera on the wrong side. I used the wrong orange sign next to the stairs. I forgot the wall decals near the garage doors. I put the side alcoves in the wrong place. Slightly too far to the side. I was wrong about the whole 256 height thing. It seems the catwalks on the original Turbine are way higher up. The design of the small shack near the vents is different. The stairs are also different. And team colored. Lastly, the sound effect of the turbines is different. Have a listen. Moving on to the outdoor areas. The windows are different. The skybox in the original used a different texture. Only 2 of the original skybox textures are simple gradients like this. And it turns out I picked the wrong one. The outdoor vents are pretty similar to the original, however, their bases are larger. Huh. The original one spin at different speeds. I never noticed. The other side basically looks correct. Let's compare the vents next. Sus joke. Oh wait, I already made one of those. I got the layout correct, but it looks like my vents are shorter. I think I know why. What happened was, since I assumed the upper floor was lower, the staircases to get to the upper floor became shorter. With shorter staircases, the vents didn't need to go as long to have the upper exit in the same location, more or less. Fascinating. One small mistake, the mistake in how high the upper floor is, had a rippling effect on how other locations were made. Let's compare the staircases. Wait, I did all that work resizing and aligning the texture to follow the slope of the staircases for nothing? The original map just uses beige. Oh well. It appears like the arching ceiling has a more defined curve to it. Wow. Very ambitious. Let's compare the spawn rooms and the hallways outside of them. Wait a second. These hallways used curved arches connected to the support pillars? I knew something was off about the ceiling. Evidently I didn't know what it was exactly though. Wow, the spawns are way different looking. Way more concrete walls and way less window surface area. Also, there's a trim near the bottom of the doors. Darn. I knew I should have kept that trim from the 2 fort doors that I took the design from. Remember? From earlier in the video? I don't know why I ditched that detail. It was the correct detail. Why are there handrails outside of these windows? Very odd. The inside of the spawn is about 50% correct. There's a scale and a water cooler, but they're in the wrong places. Turns out there's only supposed to be 2 resupply cabinets. There isn't one on this wall. I guess I remember there being something on this wall, but I didn't remember it was an arrow. I got the ceiling vents mostly correct at least. Would you look at that? There are 2 identical cubby props right next to each other at the back of the spawn. Huh. Next, let's look at the hallways leading to the intel room. Wait a moment. Did Turbine always have this pillar jutting out from the corner right here? This looks weird and out of place. How did I never notice such a strange detail? There's just a pillar disconnected from the corner in this hallway. Why? Anyways, the fire extinguisher is in the correct place, but mine's actually at the height where humans in this universe can use it. This is a common problem amongst mapmakers. It's difficult to visualize the scale of the world for a human when you're in an editor, so people often place things at head level or higher when they should be at chest or waist level. The rest of this area is similar enough. Turns out there's supposed to be spotlights above the team logo sign. That's strange. Why did I place signs for the intel room above the doors and on the walls next to the doors? What the heck was I thinking? I guess it made sense at the time, but is weird now in retrospect because we can see the original map only had signs above the doors. This is too many signs. Why did I put so many signs? The real raised platform has a metal border on the ground on all sides. Mine does not. Also, it turns out the health pack is supposed to be hidden behind the pillar. Who knew? Let's have a look at the out of bounds area. Both versions are pretty similar. It turns out the window is supposed to be bigger on the side closer to the central room. It sure is rectangular. I completely did not remember that there's supposed to be a second fake door over here. Now for the intel room. Maybe I didn't recreate this corner exactly as well as I thought. Close enough. There are 2 staircases leading into the lower floor. I made 3. Easy mistake to make. The lighting cast down from the skylight is at a different angle. Let's also see the difference on the other side of the map. There's supposed to be a spotlight in the corner to light up the control point. I didn't remember this detail and thus didn't add one. Oh! I thought the hazard floor pattern was supposed to be directly underneath the metal grate floor. Turns out, it's more inward. And so as an unfortunate consequence, I placed the control point closer to the corner. Also, it turns out the lower floor is not all metal, just the area around the control point. My bad. Let's compare the skylights. I guess I was wrong about the orientation. Turns out the higher side is supposed to be away from the vents. The metal beams in the middle are also the opposite direction. The thicker side is supposed to be lower. I'm just happy I chose the correct metal beams prop. Like I said before, there are quite a few to select from. Let's look at the out-of-bounds area behind the intel. The glass windows are indeed angled, but only at the bottom. Then they become vertical panes near the top. Interesting. I just assumed the entire thing was angled. The inside of the room is very similar. What the? The original room uses 2 omnidirectional lights. You can tell because 2 parts of the table are lit up. But the room doesn't actually have any object that physically produces light. This room contains no light fixtures, yet is lit up. How the heck was I ever going to guess a detail like that? Oh, you know the room behind the intel. Don't forget it has no light props, but is lit up somehow. Wow. Now that all the major details in all the rooms have been compared, let's compare one last thing. The speed of doors. Surely nothing can be more exciting than seeing doors open at slightly different speeds. This is how fast the garage doors open. This is how fast the spawn doors open. And with that, all the main details of this map have been compared to the original. If you want to go in and have a closer look at all the minor details not shown off, consider downloading CTF Turbine Remade from memory yourself and having a look. Speaking of, I'd like to announce the map is available for download right now. Follow the link in the video's description. If you'd like to take the map and host it on your community server, you have my permission. Tell me if you do so. I'd love to play this map alongside everyone watching right now. This has been a fun project. In the end, I accomplished my goal of making an unsettling, uncanny version of a Team Fortress 2 map, so I'm happy. If anyone out there is inspired by this video and wishes to make their own memory-based map recreation, I'd recommend it. However, I suggest having a certain level of proficiency in map making. What I mean is, I don't think this is a good beginner's project. I could see this project being frustrating to people who don't 100% know what they're doing. It's possible to recreate a space for memory without a lot of technical know-how, but the look of an area is only a small portion of what goes into map making. So with fair warning, once again, I'd recommend this project, but with the caveat that it's not for beginners. If even after hearing this warning you still wish to recreate a map from memory, I'd love to hear about it. Contact me or post about it in the comments. When I make maps for Team Fortress 2, I usually spend hours listening to music. The process of making maps is very time consuming. Every time I make a map, I like to dedicate a song to the map. One of the songs I listen to during development. This time around, that song is Sorry by Madonna. I don't wanna hear, I don't wanna know. Please don't say you're sorry, I've heard it all before. And I can take care of myself. I don't wanna hear, I don't wanna know. Please don't say forgive me, I've seen it all before. And I can't take it anymore. Note: the song has no relevance to this map, this video, or anything at all. The dedication is just for fun. Thanks for watching, even during the song part. Au revoir.